What if I told you there's a kind of secret code, a literary trick, hidden inside one of the most famous texts ever written? It's a technique that, on the surface, looks like the author got distracted, but it's actually designed to reveal a much, much deeper message. Today, we're going to unpack this thing called the Markan sandwich.
It all kicks off with a puzzle. If you've ever read the Gospel of Mark, you might get to chapter 3 and just stop. You might think, wait, did the author just completely lose his train of thought? One minute, Jesus is dealing with his family, and then, bam, he's in a totally separate argument with some religious leaders. Why would he just change the subject like that?
Well, it turns out it's not a mistake at all. It's actually a super clever, totally intentional literary move. The author is literally embedding a key right in the middle of the story, and once you see it, the whole thing just clicks into place. So, let's break it down.
Okay, so first, we've got to look at the story that gets cut off. I want you to think of this as the first piece of bread in our sandwich. It sets up this really tense, kind of awkward scene.
Picture this. Jesus is in a house, and it is so packed with people that he and his disciples can't even grab a bite to eat. It's absolute chaos. And when his family hears about all this commotion, they show up. But here's the thing. They're not there to cheer him on. They've come to take charge of him.
And this is what they're saying about him. They literally think he's lost his mind. Now, you have to remember, in their honor-shame culture, what he's doing, challenging leaders, healing on the Sabbath, it's causing a scene. It's bringing shame on the family name. So in their eyes, he's gone crazy, and they're there to shut it down.
So, just as we're bracing for this huge family confrontation, the author hits the pause button. Mark just cuts away. He leaves us hanging, with the whole conflict totally unresolved. So what on earth is going on?
This, my friends, is where we meet the literary device itself. It's famously called the Markan sandwich, and it is the key that solves this whole mystery.
Yeah, the official fancy term for it is intercalation. But let's be honest, Markan sandwich is way easier to remember. The technique is actually pretty simple. Mark starts a story. We'll call it Story A. Then he deliberately interrupts it to tell what looks like a totally random story, Story B. And only then does he go back to finish Story A.
The structure couldn't be simpler. Bread, meat, bread. So that initial story about Jesus' family, that's our top slice of bread. The story he inserts is the meat, and the conclusion to the family drama is the bottom slice. It's a really simple framework, but it has a super profound purpose.
And here is the absolute crucial part. The two stories are not random at all. They're designed to help us understand each other. The meat in the middle, that's where the author hides the main idea. It's the theological key that unlocks the real meaning of the bread around it.
So, let's take a look at the meat of this specific sandwich. The story jumps from Jesus' family to this really intense showdown with some religious leaders. And these aren't just local guys. They've come all the way from Jerusalem, the center of religious power.
The contrast here is just, wow. His own family thinks he's out of his mind, like he's delusional, but the religious leaders, they make a way, way more sinister accusation. They claim he's possessed by Beelzebub, which is just another name for Satan.
And their charge is even worse than it sounds. They're not saying he's just some poor guy who's a victim of possession. No, they are accusing him of actively, deliberately working with the Prince of Demons to do what he does. In their book, this is basically high treason against God himself.
So how does Jesus respond to an accusation that serious? Well, he just completely dismantles their argument with pure logic before giving his own, much more powerful explanation. He points out how absurd their claim is with a really simple question. How can Satan drive out Satan? It just doesn't make any sense. A kingdom that fights itself is going to fall. A house that's divided will collapse. Satan fighting his own forces would be completely self-destructive. Their whole argument just crumbles.
So, after showing them why their explanation is just plain wrong, he gives them the real reason for his power. He tells this little parable. If you want to rob a strong man's house, you've got to be strong enough to tie him up first.
The meaning here is crystal clear. Satan is the strong man. The people he holds captive through evil and illness, they're his possessions. And Jesus, well, he's claiming to be the stronger one, who has come not to partner with Satan, but to tie him up, plunder his house, and set his prisoners free.
This whole confrontation leads to that famous and often really misunderstood warning about the unforgivable sin.
In this specific context, what Jesus is talking about, blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, is exactly what the leaders just did. They saw the undeniable power of God at work in him, and they chose to call it the work of the devil. Okay, so now we get it. We understand the meat of the sandwich, that Jesus' power comes from God and is meant to defeat evil. So now we can finally go back to that second slice of bread and see how this insight just changes everything.
Mark snaps us right back to where we left off. Jesus' mother and brothers are still there, standing outside, sending someone else in to get him. They are literally on the outside, separated from what's happening on the inside.
And when he's told his family is looking for him, Jesus looks around at the people sitting right there with him, the ones who are actually listening, and he completely redefines the idea of family. He says it's not about blood anymore, it's about action. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother.
And now, the sandwich structure makes the author's point so obvious. Both the religious leaders and his own blood family are positioned as outsiders. One group hates him and condemns him. The other group just doesn't get him. The true insiders are the followers, this new family defined by who recognizes and does God's will.
And that is the genius of the Markan sandwich. What looked like a really confusing interruption was actually the key to the whole thing. The passage isn't about two different fights, it's one unified message about what it really means to belong. It's not about your bloodline, it's about your belief and your actions.
In the end, this ancient story leaves us with a pretty modern question, doesn't it? We see these three totally different reactions to Jesus. His family is confused, the leaders condemn him, and his followers show commitment. And it really makes you wonder, why do those exact same three reactions seem to pop up over and over again all throughout history, even today?